Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Brown, and Mr. Lehue is here as well.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see you.
Yeah. So we're wearing our masks today because we're doing this presentation together, and we are not socially distanced. And we very much appreciate all of you who have been wearing your masks and doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing as well. So very much appreciated. What we're going to do today is take you through a brief presentation about sexual harassment and hazing. So I'm going to cover the sexual harassment part, and then Mr. Lehue is going to cover the hazing part, okay? So what I'm going to do is I am going to share my screen here in just a moment and pull up our presentation. There we go, okay? So the reason why we're doing this is a couple of things. One, sexual harassment is an important thing to know about, and it's also important for you to know what to do if you are being sexually harassed or hazed, for that matter, or if you know somebody who's had that happen to them. So every year we like to talk to our students about the things that they can do to help with this. So we'll run through this here in just a couple of minutes. So here's what we want to get done. By the time we get done here, we want to talk about things that you can do, whether you're here at school or at home or at the mall or any place else for that matter. Then we're also going to talk about the definition of sexual harassment, give you some examples, and how to report harassment as well. So one of the group norms is another word to say, how should you handle yourself when you're around other people, basically. And as you can see from this list right here, these are things that you always do. I know you well enough now to know I don't really need to worry about any of these things. You're very respectful people. You learn from one another, and you also make sure that if someone has something to say, you listen. But for other places that don't have that kind of thing, we would kind of go through this. It works. All these things work for school. They work for work. They work out in the community. And they also work if you're with friends out somewhere. So a couple of things that you might find interesting. I think a lot of you think that sexual harassment does not happen a lot. In fact, there was a survey that was done. 20% of students in secondary schools report experiencing sexual harassment at school. That's actually false. 80% of students in secondary schools report experiencing sexual harassment at school. That may be something that you didn't know. Second thing is that sexual harassment is most frequently verbal for both boys and girls. It's those kind of comments that you shouldn't make or you shouldn't hear, but you do. Those can be sexually harassing comments. Sometimes we also think too that people who are sexually harassed also sexually harass others. Well, in fact, 75% of students who are sexually harassed also harass others. So it's kind of like a bigger thing than just one person. It's true that girls are more likely to be physically harassed and are more likely to be harassed by adults. That is very true. And that's why as a superintendent, I am always keeping my ears open for people who want to come and talk to me about things that might have happened so that I can get to the bottom of those things as quickly as possible for our students. So here are some facts. Sexual harassment is most frequently verbal for boys and girls. So for girls, you may hear comments like, "Oh, that girl slept with that boy." Sometimes, boys who are called gay or other slang terms that are inappropriate can also be termed as sexual harassment. 75% of students who are sexually harassed also harass others, and girls are more likely to be physically harassed and are more likely to be harassed by adults. Now, there's also some legal things that happen. So in my role as superintendent, I have to make sure that everybody's legal rights are protected. And there are actually state and federal laws that cover sexual harassment. There's a couple of terms that you might not be familiar with. One of them is called quid pro quo. And what it basically means is, if you do something for me, I will do something for you in return. The second thing is what's called a hostile environment. And that means if somebody's doing something and it's making you uncomfortable where you are, and it's making it difficult for you to be where you are, that person is creating a hostile environment for you. In our handbook, we've got a sexual harassment policy, and you can actually see how far back this goes. This actually goes back all the way to 1964, and it's the foundation of what's called the Civil Rights Act, which turned into what today we call the Dignity for All Students Act. And essentially what the Dignity for All Students Act says, without reading all of this, it says you have a right to a free public education and a right to feel safe in your surroundings while you're here at school. And my job as superintendent is to make sure that it stays that way. And if anybody brings anything to my attention, my job is to make sure that it is taken care of as quickly as possible. So what exactly is sexual harassment? It's unwanted. It's any uninvited behavior that the person on the receiving end finds offensive and unacceptable, and which is not reciprocated. So, you know, you're walking down the hall, you don't know somebody, they come up to you and they say something to you that was uninvited. You found it to be offensive and unacceptable, and there's no possible way that you're going to reciprocate that. And also it interferes with your life. So if somebody says something to you in a sexual way and you keep thinking about it and that has interfered with your life, that is sexual harassment by definition. And we need to help you do something about that. So the victim, I think this is an important slide, probably one of the most important slides in this presentation. The determinations of sexual harassment are based on the perceptions of the victim. So the first two bullets here, not the intentions of the perpetrator. So if somebody walks past you and gives you maybe a sexual comment and you find offense to it, and that person knows that you found offense to it, and then that person says, oh, hey, look, I was just kidding. That person still sexually harassed you. That they can't use, hey, I was just kidding, as a defense to say that they did not sexually harass you. The student is never responsible for the harasser's offensive behavior. So if there's any slide about sexual harassment that you remember today, I do want it to be this one, because if you're a person that maybe sometimes tells jokes that are off, that aren't the way they should be, or use sexual terms, or if you're a person who makes comments to people, you cannot use as a defense, I was only kidding, or I didn't mean it. That is not going to work. So you might want to keep those comments to yourself. So there's this other thing called a power imbalance. And what that means is, you know, someone's position. So that might mean position in age for students might mean an upperclassman to a lower classman, you know, their peer group, if somebody's with a different group of people, their reputation, their gender, anything that creates one person feeling like they're greater or lesser than another person is called a power imbalance. Sexual harassment can occur in a bunch of different ways. It can go student to student, it can go staff to student, it can go student to staff, it can go male to male, female to female, male to female, or female to male. So sexual harassment can occur basically in any way possible. Here are some examples of harassment, and some of the ones that are on here you may not see as harassment, but they're recognized by the law as being sexual harassment. I mean, I think touching and verbal comments and sexual name calling and spreading sexual rumors and gestures, I think all of us can agree that those would definitely be sexual harassment type things that we would know. But as you look down the list, sometimes graffiti can be considered sexual harassment as well. Jokes, cartoons, and pictures, even if you didn't mean them, are also ways of sexual harassment. So it's just important to know the different examples that are out there. For people who are in positions of authority, if they were to make inappropriate suggestive comments, inappropriate displays of affection, give inappropriate personal gifts, have inappropriate communication, and have inappropriate touching, those would also be examples of sexual harassment. Who would be a person in position of authority? As a student, that would be any adult that works in the school district would be a person in position of authority. So if any of those 5 things were to happen to you by any of our employees, I would want you to come and see me about that so I can help you with that. So if you are harassed, and I've been a superintendent, this is my 20th start of the school year. And unfortunately, I have seen and worked people through a lot of sexual harassment issues in my career. If you're harassed, tell someone. It could be your parents, it could be a friend, it could be me, but tell someone if you feel that you were sexually harassed. If you can, keep a journal. Sometimes a journal helps you because sometimes a sexually harassing incident can be emotional in nature. And if you're able to write those things down, that it'll help you a week later when you have to repeat what happened to be able to go back to your notes or a journal. And if you feel comfortable, tell the harasser to stop. Unfortunately, we are not always in situations where we feel comfortable telling someone who is harassing us to stop. But if you feel that you can, tell them to stop. You can file a formal complaint, and the staff must investigate the complaint. Part of the federal law is if you were to bring something to me that says that you felt you were sexually harassed, A, I would do it anyway, but B, the federal law says that we have to investigate that complaint and get to the bottom of it. If you see someone being harassed, which sometimes happens, again, tell someone, write some notes down. What's helpful for us is if what time did it happen? Where was it? Was it in a hallway? Was it was it outside? If it was outside, where was it? That helps us because sometimes we can go back and look at our cameras, and there's different ways for us to help investigate to be able to get to the bottom of it. If you feel that you can, tell the harasser to stop and encourage that victim to stand up for themselves and to report the incident. And then we can also help you to file a formal complaint so that we can make it stop for good. So here's what might happen. Here's what might happen. And I've had all of these things happen in my career with students and actually in some adults. They don't necessarily have to go in this order, but if we went from the least severe type of harassment to the most severe, you would see verbal warning, parent conference, counseling, detention, suspension. And when they say expulsion, you're not allowed to kick somebody out of school. In New York State, you have a right to a free public education until you're 21, but that education can take place someplace else besides the school building. And that's what expulsion means here in New York State. But sometimes something so serious, it goes right to the last one, to the expulsion, or sometimes it's a verbal warning. It depends on the case when it's investigated, but those would be the levels of action that would happen.
So hazing is another topic that probably if you're a sophomore, junior, or senior, you've seen this presentation by Dr. Brown and myself before in the gymnasium. If you're a freshman, this is new. But hazing is a situation that often happens with kids involved in a team aspect. In sports, it's really associated a lot with that or any extracurricular. But I want you to read this definition while I read it to you about what hazing is. So hazing is any activity expected of someone seeking membership or initiation into a group that humiliates, degrades, abuses, harms, or endangers them, regardless of a person's willingness to participate. That's a pretty big definition right there. And I want to break it down for you a little bit because this can be a pretty serious thing if it happens. If you put it into an equation, you could put these pieces together. Peer pressure can be a very big negative influence sometimes. Sometimes peer pressure can be positive, but in this situation, it's a negative. You're feeling that pressure from your fellow students or someone that you're wanting to be a part of a group. And that's that other part of the equation, this desire to belong. Could be that you just are anything, you'll do anything to be part of whatever that team is or that group. And the possibility of this negative peer pressure and that desire to belong, it can create what's called a coercive environment. And that's a negative piece. You're being asked to do something that you really don't want to do. And in the definition, I put it back on this slide also, The very last part of that definition is regardless of a person's willingness to participate. So someone could be put in this situation when they don't really want to, but they feel like they want to perform some task just to be part of the group. And I'm going to explain more of that. So the data of going just for high school students, it is 47% of high school students at some point or another have reported at least one hazing experience while they were in high school. So this is really a big number. To think that almost half of the kids in high school, whether it's just a high school themselves or an athletics team or an extracurricular, that they experience some form of hazing, that is pretty significant. That's why it's important to discuss here. So, and here are some examples of what might happen in this negative peer pressure situation that could be interpreted as hazing. So if a group is maybe the varsity soccer team, they're super successful, and you have a kid coming in who wants to be part of that team, and the kids who are veterans are thinking like, you know what, we're going to put this kid through his paces a little bit. And they start doing some things like this. They do something to deprive that kid of sleep, or they're making prank phone calls that are inappropriate, participating in some drinking game, or forced to do a tattoo or a piercing, something sexual in nature, which often these hazing situations, especially you get into colleges, a sexual act is sometimes is often involved with these hazing situations. It's really is difficult to comprehend. Or just being yelled at, screamed at, cursed at. They're putting that person who really wants to be part of that group into a negative situation, but that kid will do almost anything to still be part of that group. So this is that negative peer pressure that can really have a negative influence on the team and a student who's going through it. And the problem with hazing is that there's this perceived benefit. There's this some sort of understanding that it's creating these positive responses, that it's like a team bonding situation, or it's a tradition. We've done it for years and years and years, and this is what you always do when you want to be part of that team. Or this notion that there's respect being built because you're getting some new kid to do something that the veterans want him to do or her to do. This feeling of accomplishment. Now I'm part of that group, so this is a better thing, or you're feeling strong or tough, or any of these things on this list. There's this belief that hazing creates these responses, when really that is very much not the case. What really happens is it's creating a harmful environment for not only that student being hazed, but for that group who's doing the hazing. It really causes a great deal of stress, guilt. You can't sleep because you're so stressed out. Relationships, which we emphasize so much at Marcus Whitman, the relationships are so important here, of how we associate with each other, support each other in the good situations or bad situations. That relationship is a foundation of what we do here at Marcus Whitman. These hazing situations, if it ever happened here, which I hope it doesn't, those relationships really get damaged quickly, and they're very hard to repair if you go through the situation. And then ultimately, you have someone who's just humiliated or embarrassed, and it just creates a culture of you just can't trust one another. So it's really important to understand that you're building a team together, but doing things that are positive for everybody. Dr. Brown touched on it a moment ago when he was doing his presentation. You get in some of these harassment situations sometimes, and someone will say, well, I was just kidding around. And a thing I've said before, like, well, who was it funny for? Was it funny for the people that were doing it, or funny for the person that it was happening to? And if you're kidding around, everybody feels that it's kidding around. It's not creating these situations for half of the group where they're feeling stressed or humiliated, because that is not kidding around. That's way different. And really, overall, as we're doing this presentation, it's about wellness. There's so many things that are important about staying healthy. And really, there's all these components, these four pieces you see on this slide. We talk about physical wellness, of being fit, especially as an athletic director. That's an important piece. But really, I feel even bigger, especially lately, is mental wellness, emotional wellness. And then that social wellness is important, of how we connect with one another. So these pieces, these components are really important, in that we're taking care of each other and supporting our fellow students, supporting the whole district in these areas, so we're well in a more complete way. You want to take it home there, Dr. Brown?
Sure. So, when we look at our own standards, I mean, I think, again, I've enjoyed my time here and getting to know everybody, and I love being here every single day and getting a chance to talk to you and all that. When we look at our pride that we give, productive, respectful, integrity, determined, excellence, I see that every single day. And you look at the other side of that, perception, reputation, image, dignity, equality. Those are all the pieces that we strive for as well. Making sure that we have a positive perception and a great reputation, and our image is very, very good, and that we've got a lot of dignity in ourselves and other people, and that we treat everybody equally. So, I think just to finish this whole thing, it's trusting each other with dignity and respect. Your education is important, but my biggest thing is, make a difference. And I always say, and I have that bulletin board right outside my office that you'll be able to see again once the construction is done. And it's my You Matter bulletin board. And I always try to find pictures of you to put up there for a couple weeks at a time. But make a difference, and bystanders can help identify what is happening and take the appropriate steps to intervene. So if you see something, say something. That's all. I'm gonna stop the share here and get us back to us. And I hope that I know it's not always the most fun in the world to watch presentations, especially when it's in this way. But we do appreciate it. We want you to be safe and well and happy, and school needs to be fun, right, Mr. Leahy?
Absolutely.
So,
And I think that the idea that you love being here every day, because I know I do, Dr.
Yeah.
Brown does, and there's so many people that feel that same way, of making this an environment that you just can't wait to be at every day, because you're feeling that support that you need to be successful and enjoy your day.
yeah,
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
So thanks everybody for watching and listening, and we will see you soon.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. Bye.